What is going on, everybody? Today we are talking fantasy football because the NFL season's right around the corner. And I don't know about you guys, but my NFL draft is in about 2 weeks. So I want to talk to you guys about some sleeper players that I have that I think can help you guys win your leagues. Plus, I want to talk about my strategy and how I kind of look at fantasy football. And I think the strategy is the way to essentially help you guys win. Let's get right into this. One of the things that I think people do that's a massive mistake is they'll take guys with big names. Last year, people took Davante Adams and they were taking him as high as like the top 7 or 8 picks. And we already knew Davante Adams' quarterback situation wasn't great. This year, people are going to make the same mistake with Justin Jefferson. Although Justin Jefferson himself is a great football player, right now he's going as one of the top 3 or 4 picks in pretty much most leagues. To me, that doesn't make sense. You got to realize Justin Jefferson has a rookie quarterback. So for me, scheme and quarterback is a big part of ultimately how I draft. So if you're going to look at which wide receivers will have the most success, you want to look at wide receivers that play in pass happy schemes, if that makes sense. You want to look at who Andy Reid has, who Ben Johnson has, who Sean McVay has, Mike McCarthy. Those are the offensive coaches that essentially throw the ball a crap ton. If you want to look at which running backs to draft, you want to look at run schemes as well as offensive linemen. You want to look at which teams have the best offensive line talents, which teams are predicted to ultimately be the best offensive lines in the NFL. So last year, you would have looked at the Eagles, the Browns, the Chiefs, and those running backs all had a lot of success. Obviously, the Eagles are a unique situation in which the quarterback basically steals most touchdowns from the running backs. But this year, the Eagles have Saquon Barkley, and I think Barkley is such a great offensive player that behind that Eagles offensive line, I think he's going to have a lot of success. And then you can take it even a step further. You look at the Chiefs. The Chiefs will once again have a really good offensive line this season. But the unique thing with the Chiefs is I don't think Isaiah Pacheco is that talented of a running back, right? As an individual running back, I don't think he's that talented, which means there's a chance that in the next season or two, he might get replaced. Even as soon as this season, there's a chance that, not necessarily replaced, but there's a chance someone else steps up and ends up taking some carries away from him. And you can kind of do that across the board. Even the Browns. The Browns have one of the best offensive lines, but you also got to, factor in what makes that offensive line so great. Yes, they have some good players, but I think the difference with the Browns, at least over the last 4 years, has been that they have arguably the best offensive line coach in the NFL. That is Bill Callahan. Bill Callahan's no longer there. Bill Callahan is now with the Tennessee Titans, where he's the offensive line coach for his son, who Brian Callahan has become the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. And to me, that's the most important part when it comes to drafting for fantasy football. Run scheme, you want to look at Kyle Shanahan, you want to look at Mike McDaniel. Offensive line talent, you want to look at the coaches, and you want to factor those two things in together. And then when you think about which receivers to take, you got to look at the quarterback. You got to look at the actual scheme and the design element of it. You got to see how often tight ends are being utilized, right? We know Luke Getsy loves to get his tight ends involved. We saw Cole Kmet have a tremendous amount of success the past couple of seasons. And you might even consider Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers now that Luke Getsy's with the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, that's how I handle the scheme aspect of it. I hope that all makes sense. I do want to go ahead and actually get into some players. I think there's some players that are going to have a lot of success this season, and we're going to start right away with the running backs. Now, before we move forward, I want to just take a second to give a big shout out to the sponsor of this channel. That is Underdog Sports, and if you're not signed up with Underdog yet, what are you waiting for? Underdog is the best fantasy sports platform out there, and their pick'em game really puts your football knowledge to the test. For me personally, I'm always thinking about matchups when it comes to Underdog, and specifically that pick'em game. Last year the Cowboys and Rams played, and I knew that two things would happen. The Cowboys would throw the ball a lot. The Rams would probably match that. So with that, I took the over on both Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. And I knew the Rams would try to match the points that the Cowboys scored. So I also took the over on Micah Parsons getting at least 1 sack. I got 2 other picks right as well. And I hit on all 5 of these picks. And I turned $5 into $400 last season. Now, you don't have to do 5 picks. Honestly, you can do 2 or 3 picks. And you can turn $5 into $20, $30, $50. It really just depends on the multiplier, and you can basically use your football knowledge to make some extra cash. There's a link down in the comments below, so make sure you guys check that out. And they're also going to do a deposit match of up to $250. Go check that link out and support this channel. Now let's just get right back into this video. We're going to start right away with the running backs. There's one guy that I absolutely love for fantasy football purposes. That is going to be the Green Bay Packers running back Josh Jacobs. Now, some people are sleeping on Josh Jacobs. I don't know how we got to the point where Josh Jacobs is so disrespected that people think he's, going to be like the 50th best player. At least that's what his current ADP is. I think it was 52.6 when I last checked. That puts him somewhere in rounds 4 to 5, which is kind of crazy because I think Josh Jacobs is one of the 4 or 5 best running backs in the NFL. In 2022, when Josh Jacobs had that monster year, one of the reasons why he had that monster year was not only was his offensive line consistent, the scheme was good, but the guy broke tackles, the guy made people miss, and he put together an entire season. In 2023, not only was the Raiders' offensive line bad, but Josh Jacobs was also in and out of the lineup, and I think people drafted Josh Jacobs last year in fantasy as one of the top 5 or 6 guys, and people are disappointed. And maybe people think he's not that good of a running back, but Josh Jacobs is a phenomenal running back. And in my opinion, the Green Bay Packers have one of the best run schemes in the NFL. I think Matt LaFleur does a really, really good job with that run game. Matt LaFleur has historically ran a ton of outside zone. He's run a lot of wide zone. And I think Josh Jacobs in the zone scheme is where it fits him the most, right? As a running back, Josh Jacobs has had the most success in the zone scheme. Early on with the Raiders, Josh Jacobs under John Gruden was mostly running the zone. The guy's going to be a phenomenal football player. Now, you do got to keep in mind, they did draft Marshawn Lloyd. They do have A.J. Dillon as well, who's coming back. Aaron Jones has obviously left. But to me, the Packers have a great offensive line. They have a great quarterback. I think Jordan Love's the next great quarterback in the NFL. I think Jordan Love's going to become this season a top 3 or 4 quarterback. I think the guy has phenomenal upside. Josh Jacobs is the guy to have, man. I can't be higher than anyone other than Josh Jacobs when it comes to like the average draft position at this moment. There's one run scheme that I really, really like, and this is the one run scheme that you guys have to go out and get. I think it's the best run scheme in the NFL. Mentioned it slightly already. Mike McDaniel, man, the guy's such a great coach, and he's such a great designer of the run game. One of the interesting things with the Shanahan tree that's kind of started, and it was really Kyle Shanahan that brought some of these guys in. Mike McDaniel is a great run game designer. Sean McVay, who also kind of comes from that Shanahan tree, is a great pass game designer. And you can kind of see the differences. Like Sean McVay does a great job designing the pass, and then you see Mike McDaniel, who does a great job designing a phenomenal run game. In my opinion, the Miami Dolphins running situation is the best in the NFL. It's the one you want. Now, picking the right running back is going to be the hard part. I think Davante Achane is the guy that everybody's going to go out and get. And I'm 100% with getting Achane. In fact, I would absolutely target him as high as, probably like pick 12 to 15. I think there's a chance this guy ends up having a monster season, but I'd also be hesitant with that a little bit because there's also a chance he gets hurt again, as he got hurt last season. For me, I drafted Achane in my dynasty leagues, and I'm gonna 100% keep him. I've had offers. A guy offered me a first-round pick for Achane. I would rather keep this guy because I think Achane's upside long-term is huge. But for fantasy purposes, if it's just a 1-year standard or PPR, if it's just a 1-year commitment, I'm not 100% sure if Achane makes the most sense because they also drafted Jalen Wright in the 4th round. Jalen Wright is fast, man. The guy has real speed. And then you obviously have Raheem Mostert, who they actually gave a new contract to, right? They essentially extended him. So that's the one thing that I hesitate with Devon Achane. But I do love the running back. I think he has a ton of upside. I think his ADP right now is somewhere in the mid-20s. So if you can get him in the 3rd round somehow, or even at the back end of the 2nd round, I think that's absolutely perfect. But Devon Achane is the guy that I would target. Jalen Wright, if he's going in like round 14 or 15, or if he's not even being drafted, you got to stash him on your bench. Jalen Wright could absolutely break out. You could absolutely have the same type of year that Achane had, if not even better, right? Like there's a chance that Jalen Wright stays healthy and he actually ends up playing more than maybe one of these other running backs. I think Raheem Mostert got way too many carries last season. I think it was the most carries he's had in his career. He won't have those type of touches again. But the Dolphins run game is the one that I'm 100% targeting. I also mentioned this earlier. The former Browns offensive line coach, Bill Callahan, has now went to the Tennessee Titans. And for that reason alone, I am taking the Tennessee Titans running backs. Now, there's 2 running backs you can consider. There's Tajay Spears and there's Tony Pollard. I think Tajay Spears is the running back I would take. And I would take him because of where he's kind of being valued. Right now, Tajay Spears is being valued as running back 31. That puts him at 108th overall. That's really, really low, right? If you're doing 12 picks per draft, what is that, like 8-9 rounds? To me, Tajay Spears has a lot more upside than Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard is a good running back. Tony Pollard is a good, you give him the ball in space, he'll make people miss. He's a good running back if he's the number 2 running back. I don't think Tony Pollard has the ability to be the true number 1 running back. And we've seen this with certain guys, right? This isn't unique only to Tony Pollard, but think about this. Over the last 5 years, Tony Pollard's been a backup for 4 of those 5 years. Those 4 years were essentially his best years. In the year he was asked to be the lead back, he struggled to ultimately keep that job. And that was behind the best offensive line, or one of the top 2 or 3 units, which the Cowboys had in 2023. I think there's a good chance Tony Pollard, as a RB2 behind Tajay Spears, is going to have a really good season, but I think there's a chance Spears has more carries and more overall touches this season. Plus, don't overlook the fact that Bill Callahan's now with the Tennessee Titans, and they've revamped that offensive line. J.C. Latham, first-round pick this season. Peter Skronsky, first-round pick last season. They added a couple other pieces across the offensive line. I think this offensive line is going to be a great offensive line. I think Bill Callahan's going to really turn this unit into a well-coached unit. They're going to be able to do things similarly to what the Browns are doing. Right? The Browns' offensive line wasn't great in terms of individual players. Don't get me wrong, they're good football players. But it's the offensive line coach that puts it together. Right? Do not overlook coaching. Coaching is more important than the individual players, in my opinion. Now, if you think Tony Pollard is going to be a better running back, then you take Tony Pollard. Now, there's also one other thing that I kind of want to touch on when it comes to the run game specifically. That is the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons are a very, very interesting team because they have the best offensive line in the NFL when it comes to the run game. And it's not close, right? That offensive line was solely constructed to run the football. I think they are one of the not weakest. Weakest is not the right word. The Atlanta Falcons offensive line is one of the lightest units in the NFL. I think it was Brandon Thorne that sent out an email with the stats. I think they ranked 30th in terms of the weight of the offensive line. But you can watch the tape of that offensive line. The way these guys reach block, the way these guys run the zone, it's crazy. And they have a great set of interior guys. I'd argue they have the best interior offensive line in the NFL. You got Matthew Bergeron at left guard, you got Drew Dalman at center, and you got Chris Lindstrom at right guard. That's a really, really good unit. Now, the interesting thing with the Falcons is the Atlanta Falcons have a brand new coaching staff. They have a brand new scheme. They have a brand new system going into this next season. Their head coach, Raheem Morris, is a defensive-minded coach, which means their offensive coordinator is going to 100% control the offense. So Zach Robinson is the guy they picked. Zach Robinson was the pass game coordinator with the Rams last season. And Puka Nacua said that Zach Robinson was a big part of him ultimately having success. Now, here's the interesting thing. So as great as the offensive line is, they actually retained the offensive line coach. So the Falcons, great job keeping this offensive line coach. He's done a great job. So Zach Robinson, who's coming over, run the offense, kept the same offensive line coach, which benefits the Falcons. But we don't really know if Bijan Robinson is going to have the same type of role that he ultimately had last year with Tyler Algier, right? Algier last year had, I think, 186 carries. Robinson had 214 carries. To me, that's a pretty damn close to 50-50 split. Something tells me that Zach Robinson will do things differently. But Zach Robinson's specialty also is the pass game. It's not necessarily the run game. But the offensive line coach from last season, Dwayne Ledford, great offensive line coach. He is actually now the run game coordinator. So it'll be interesting to see what type of scheme and system they ultimately design over there. Also keep in mind, Raheem Morris was also part of that insane 2013 NFL coaching staff of the Redskins, where they had like Sean McVay, they had Kyle Shanahan, they had Mike Daniel, Matt LaFleur, right? All these guys are probably top 10 coaches at this point. Raheem Morris was also part of that unit. So just kind of keep that in mind. Also, the Falcons did get rid of Cordell Patterson, who's now with the Steelers. So there's a chance that Robinson does end up getting a lot more carries this season. And I say all that because, if I'm picking a running back this season, I am picking Robinson first. I am taking him over Christian McCaffrey, solely because I don't know if McCaffrey can do what he did again this season that he did last season. I find it hard to believe that he's going to continue to play at that level and continue to replicate it. But don't get me wrong, right? I would still take McCaffrey second when it comes to running backs. But what it means with Bijan Robinson is if he's RB2, that means he's going to be about the 7th or 8th overall pick. I would actually take Robinson over a lot of the receivers as well. I think he's going to be a phenomenal football player this season. And if Tyler Algier is there, you take him as well, man. Obviously, at the moment, he's RB36, which puts him around the 158 average draft position. That's by my math about around 13 or 14. I am taking him as well because injuries are hard to predict. Plus, we don't know how they'll split and those type of things. Also, Algier's a pretty good running back himself, right? The guy, his rookie season, literally outperformed Robinson in his rookie season, right? So don't sleep on him. So that's the running back aspect of this video. Let's get into wide receivers and tight ends as well. We'll start with the wide receivers. First and foremost, there's one offensive coordinator, there's one offensive coach that I really, really like, right? So when I say offensive coach, I'm talking about play callers. It could be offensive coordinators. It could be head coaches. To me, an offensive coach is the same as, Kyle Shanahan's an offensive coach, Andy Reid's an offensive coach. Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson are also offensive coaches, although those two guys are offensive coordinators specifically. Talking about that 2013 Washington Redskins team, Bobby Slowick was also a part of that offense. And Bobby Slowick, if you guys don't know, is the offensive coordinator of the Texans. So the Texans also have a defensive-minded head coach. So what that essentially means is the Texans also rely on Bobby Slowick to run the entire offense. The same way Zach Robinson's asked to run the offense for the Falcons, Bobby Slowick is asked to run the offense of the Texans. Now, for the first time in his entire coaching career, Bobby Slowick called plays last season, and CJ Stroud had a monster year. The Texans had a great offense, and I am 100% of the belief that Bobby Slowick had a big part of that. And this season, they added Stephon Diggs, and I think Stephon Diggs is the wide receiver you want. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Nico Collins will still be a really good wide receiver. But Collins right now is wide receiver 11. He's going basically in the beginning of the second round, if not at the end of the first round. To me, you can take him if you want him at that point. I think he'll be a good wide receiver this season. But Stephon Diggs is going somewhere in the 3rd to 4th round, and I would take that. I think there's a chance Stephon Diggs, as talented as he is, has, a top 10 season this season, right? Diggs is also very, very, very motivated to prove everybody wrong, and Bobby Slowick's a great offensive coordinator. He's going to get Stephon Diggs the football. So if I'm drafting and you have the choice of Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, I am taking Stephon Diggs. I'd probably stay away from Tank Dell because I think his role changes a little bit this season. I think Diggs has played a lot in the slot. And I think with Tank Dell, I think that's going to come down a little bit as well. I think they'll have some other wide receivers rotating in. They also have some good tight ends as well. But Stephon Diggs is, in my opinion, the guy that you want. And I'm literally targeting this guy right now. Let's go ahead and get into the next set of guys. So there's two other wide receivers that I'm taking. We'll start with this first guy here. I think this guy's probably the most I don't want to say overhyped. That's not the right word, but he's the guy that everybody hypes every year, right? So I don't know if that's overhyped. I'm taking George Pickens. I am targeting this guy. Wide receiver 27 is freaking crazy for George Pickens. Look, George Pickens is one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL. George Pickens is the top 5 wide receiver from a talent perspective. And I think for the first time, you're going to get George Pickens 2 things. You are going to get him a good quarterback that can actually get him the football. And you're going to get a good offensive coordinator that for the first time, I shouldn't say the first time, but the Steelers haven't had a really, really good offensive coordinator in a while. But they actually hired Arthur Smith to be their offensive coordinator. So Arthur Smith will be calling plays for the Steelers this season. He'll be in charge of the offense. And what's interesting about that is Arthur Smith was with the Falcons for the last 3 years. It obviously didn't work out as him being the head coach, and they fired him. But I would make the argument that as an offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith's one of the best in the NFL. So the Steelers went out and they got Arthur Smith. He's going to be calling the plays for the Steelers. And I think George Pickens, who's wide receiver 27th, he's going somewhere in like the 5th round, is a massive steal to have. When Matt Ryan was with Arthur Smith, which was in Arthur Smith's first year, so in 2021, Matt Ryan had a really, really good year that year. Obviously, he was at the end of his career, but more than that, Kyle Pitts had his best year of his career. Cordell Patterson was really, really good that year as well. And the Falcons offense wasn't that good, right? Arthur Smith went there and their offense really wasn't that good. They didn't have a long-term option at quarterback. They tried figuring it out. They really weren't able to figure it out, right? They ended up going through a couple different quarterbacks. Desmond Ridler was one. I think Marcus Mariota was the other. But to me, Arthur Smith has a ton of upside as an offensive coach, and I think George Pickens has the talent to be a top 5 wide receiver. So I think for the first time, he's going to have a quarterback and offensive coordinator combo. And I don't think Russell Wilson's that good of a quarterback, to be honest, guys. I'm not a huge Russell Wilson fan. Justin Fields might even win that job, right? I've been hearing a lot about how there will be a true quarterback battle. Whoever ends up winning that battle, regardless, I think Pickens is going to well outperform that wide receiver 27 slot, which is where his average ADP is right now. To me, Pickens finishes as a top 12 wide receiver this season. And finally, the last wide receiver I would take, and I think this guy's being severely overlooked. He's currently being ranked as wide receiver 60. That is Jerry Jeudy of the Cleveland Browns. Now, this one's interesting because Jerry Jeudy obviously got traded to the Browns, and the Browns already have Amari Cooper. They already have some other weapons there, and I'm not a huge fan of Kevin Stefanski. I'm not sure what type of offensive coordinator this guy is, or offensive coach, I should say. I understand he's the head coach, but the Cleveland Browns haven't been great on the offensive side, right? They've been good, don't get me wrong. They've done a really good job running the football, but Deshaun Watson's never really returned to form. And I think there's a real chance that this is the year that he does return to form. And if he doesn't, I think Kevin Stefanski gets fired. The Browns have a great defense. They have a great offensive line. They have great weapons. They have they have a quarterback, I should say this. They have a quarterback that at one point was great, right? And he might not ever be that. Maybe he was a product of the system at that time. But Deshaun Watson should be able to have success. And I think Jerry Jeudy has the massive potential, absolutely massive potential. And he has the potential this season specifically to end up with, 1,200 yards. I think Jerry Jeudy is one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL. I don't think there's 58 or 59 wide receivers better than Jerry Jeudy. I think this guy has legit upside to be one of the top 10 to 12 wide receivers. I think the big issue with him has been the fact that over his first 4 seasons with the Denver Broncos, they literally have not had a quarterback in the majority of those seasons. I know they went out and got Russell Wilson, but that obviously never really worked. And I also don't think Jerry Jeudy was very happy with the Denver Broncos. And of course, he didn't play all that much this past season. Now, I'm not sure if Jerry Jeudy loves the game of football, and that's like the one thing I personally cannot measure. Does he love football? Does he not? And I think that's going to ultimately be one of the factors if this guy has success in his career. If Jerry Jeudy puts 100% effort into wanting to be great, the guy will be great. And it'll start this season. The fact that he's wide receiver 59 is crazy to me because he's talented as hell. He is one of the top 5 best route runners in the NFL. And the fact that now he's going to be paired up with Amari Cooper, I think those two guys are going to go really, really well together. I think Jerry Jeudy's a great number 2 wide receiver, and I think Amari Cooper's a great number 1 wide receiver. And those two guys together should be very, very good. Jerry Jeudy's the guy I'm taking, man. Wide receiver 59, wide receiver 60. That's very, very low. Round 8, 9, or 10 is it's pretty low in my opinion. There's also 2 guys I want to talk about really quickly. These are 2 guys that I would hesitate with. There's 1 Davante Adams and there's 2 Justin Jefferson. Now, I would rather take Davante Adams based off of his ADP than Justin Jefferson based off of his ADP. So at the moment, Justin Jefferson is being valued as the 4th or 5th overall pick. That's his average ADP right now. And I think people are going to realize that that's a massive mistake. He's not going to perform to that point. Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in the NFL. There's no question about it. But your quarterback has a big factor into you having success. And Justin Jefferson's going to have a rookie quarterback. Now, of course, there is a chance that JJ McCarthy ends up being a really good quarterback, right? There's a chance that this season, the way we saw CJ Stroud have a good season last season, there's a chance JJ McCarthy has that same season, but there's also a chance that JJ McCarthy ends up having the Bryce Young type season. The CJ Stroud, the Justin Herbert, those are the exceptions. Most quarterbacks struggle early on, and I think with JJ McCarthy, there's a chance he's going to have a lot of struggles. And Justin Jefferson being the 5th overall pick, you're not going to get that same production out of him this season. Now, Davante Adams, wide receiver 13, he's being, picked somewhere in the middle of the 2nd round or later. I think that's good value for Davante Adams. The thing with Justin Jefferson is he's a top 5 pick. Davante Adams is middle of the 2nd round. So with Davante Adams, you do got to keep in mind one thing. Keep an eye on that quarterback battle, right? Gardner Minshew has had success in the past. Aiden O'Connell could take a year 2 leap. I think Davante Adams last year was the worst that we would see from him, and he still had a pretty good season. I think this season he can have a much better season based on that quarterback. And I also do think that there's a chance Davante Adams gets traded. We've been hearing a lot of rumors. And I'm not saying draft him because he's going to get traded. That'd be obviously a dumb thing to do. But just keep in mind where he's ultimately drafted, right? If Davante Adams slipping because people don't really want that quarterback situation, and he's like, let's say in round 3 available, you take him, right? He's going to be a good football player no matter what. I think if he's like wide receiver 13, if he's like the 20th overall pick or a little bit lower than that, I think he's a good value at that point. Let's talk about tight ends. There's really just one guy that I want to touch on. This guy right now is being valued as tight end 6, and that is Kyle Pitts. And I think Kyle Pitts is going to be the best tight end in the NFL this season. I think statistically, Kyle Pitts is going to be phenomenal. Now, there's a couple of reasons to that. First and foremost, Kyle Pitts, I don't care what anybody says. I don't care if people say, well, he hasn't lived up to the hype or whatever. Kyle Pitts is the most talented tight end in the NFL, and it's not close. But the issue with Kyle Pitts has been the fact that his quarterback play has been really, really poor, right? The quarterback play for Kyle Pitts has been poor. When Kyle Pitts had Matt Ryan for the 1 year he had him, he had over 1,000 yards. In the next 2 seasons, he had like 800 or 900 yards combined. It might not have even been that. To me, Kyle Pitts is coming into a system now where, one, you get Zach Robinson, which is kind of unknown, but we do know Zach Robinson was the pass game coordinator for the Rams. And 2, he gets Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins might not win you a Super Bowl, but Kirk Cousins will put up 4,000 yards, and he'll get Kyle Pitts the football. I think there's a good chance Kyle Pitts is going to have 1,100 or 1,200 yards. There's a good chance he'll have like 7, 8 touchdowns, because there's a good chance Kirk Cousins is going to get him the football. Now, the Falcons are talented on offense. They also have Drake London, who you have to keep in mind is going to take targets away from Kyle Pitts. They have Bijan Robinson. They have Tyler Algier. They have a couple other playmakers as well on that offense. But I think there's a chance Kyle Pitts is the best player on that offense, right? I think there's a chance he's better than Bijan Robinson. Now, obviously, Robinson's probably one of the top 2 or 3 running backs, but Pitts is also one of the top 2 or 3 tight ends, right? So don't sleep on Kyle Pitts. So those are kind of the guys that I'm having, and I should just make one other statement. Obviously, some of you guys know this. I'm a Raider fan. You guys can see that image back there on the wall. Michael Mayer, man, consider taking Michael Mayer. I know a lot of people are going to take Brock Bowers over Michael Mayer because everybody, has it in their head. And I think this is something that we've kind of been conditioned to think, and that is that Brock Bowers is going to be a generational player. He's going to be so great. And I do think he'll be a really, 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 really good football player. But I don't think he's going to be that his rookie season. I find it hard to believe that Brock Bowers in his rookie season is going to have like 1,200 yards, right? I think there's a real chance that Brock Bowers is going to be moved around so much. He's going to go from the fullback position to, he'll go into motion, line up in the slot. He might line up, on 3rd down at the inline tight end position. But on 1st and 2nd downs, Michael Mayer will be the true tight end. And I think if you got Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew as your quarterbacks, with Luke Getsy specifically, they're going to get the ball to the tight end, right? They're going to get the ball to Michael Mayer or Brock Bowers. I think it's going to be Michael Mayer. We've been hearing reports as well in camp that Michael Mayer's been dominating in camp. Michael Mayer's had a massive camp, and he is literally tight end 37 right now, right? So I am considering Michael Mayer if I need a tight end. If you don't get one of the top, 8 or 9 guys, you decide not to draft the tight end. Michael Mayer is the guy that I would absolutely consider and I would pick up. Let me know what you guys think, man. What do you guys think about these picks? What do you guys think about my strategy? Let me know down in the comments below. Training camp starts next week, so we're going to have a lot of training camp film breakdowns, and we'll continue the film breakdowns this season. We'll continue to cover the same teams that we've ultimately been covering. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time with another video.